Students, we're back for another Screencastify lesson on world history. Today we're going to be learning about the area that is called Mesopotamia, and we are going to focus on a civilization that pops up here, 3500 BCE to roughly 2000 BCE. Mesopotamia literally means the land between two rivers. Those two rivers are the very famous Tigris and Euphrates rivers. You can see those here flowing kind of on this diagonal pattern on this map. You have the Mediterranean Sea on one side. You probably recognize Egypt down here. And you've got these two rivers that kind of crisscross this area here, the Tigris and the Euphrates, flowing down to the Persian Gulf. That's Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers or around two rivers. The civilization that develops here are called the Sumerians. It begins with two city-states, Ur and Uruk, and then a few more are going to be popping up and joining as well. That Uruk name is actually where the current-day country of Iraq comes from, is from the city-state of Uruk. So Ur and Uruk were two of those cities that got their acts together and had agriculture, and many people began to move to these places. Now, one issue that we do see in this area is while we lump all these people together and call them Sumerians, is that these city-states have the similarities to make them a civilization. The language is somewhat similar, the religion is somewhat similar, buildings are somewhat similar, and so on. That's what makes a civilization, having these similar characteristics. But they aren't necessarily identical. Also, it does not mean they're united. I think sometimes we confuse maybe a term like nation with civilization. Now, a nation would mean you're all united under one government, you're together. That is not what Sumeria is like at all. These city-states fought each other a lot, sometimes conquering each other and controlling them and then losing it, and border fights and all of those fun types of things. One of the theories that you will see a lot on why they don't ever really unite, even though they have all these similarities, and they're also peaceful too, by the way. They trade with each other. You can move from one city-state to another, it appears. So they can be friendly with all of these trade networks and even alliances. Or they could be enemies as well. One of the theories, though, is that it's the rivers and the mountains that divide up the terrain, and they make it really easy to have legitimate borders. So I'll just give you a contrast to that. The Nile River flows relatively straight in Egypt, and it doesn't really divide anything up, and there's nothing but deserts all around. So the people flock to that river. They're united by that river. The Tigris and the Euphrates, as I showed you, kind of has natural borders that can get created. Plus throw some mountains in there as well. And it's easy to say, this is my territory, yours is on the other side, and be defensive about it, making it rather tough to unite. We will see this in another civilization in ancient Greece. Ancient Greece is never really united until by the sword by Alexander's father, Philip II. We'll study that at another time, though. But they are fiercely independent city-states in Greece, just like they will be in Sumer, especially at the beginning. Now, here are these similar characteristics that pop up. We have things like a polytheistic religion. This is many gods. And most city-states, we're going to find references to these many gods. Some gods may be more important, though, in different city-states. It might be what we call a matron or a patron god. And it might even change some of the stories, where you might have a similar story in one city-state, but they put a different god as kind of the hero or villain of the story. And another city-state might reduce that role in that story, but keeping it rather similar. Farming is, of course, needed, especially grain, being able to produce that. Also, they begin to have the same type of building techniques. They are able to use mud bricks, and they do start to get a style that we call ziggurat. Let's show that on the Jamboard for you here. And on the Jamboard, it's kind of an artistic drawing, but it does show you those mud bricks and the ziggurat style. Here would be more probably a temple, government style building, and then of course your residential buildings. It's somewhat squared off and tapered up. Now here are the waters that create those divisions. You can see how it would be easy to define your territory. So like all out here around these mountains, this is ours right here. If you come over here, we have a problem. Or like with the Nile, there wasn't those natural borders. Another couple examples here. Of course, the more detailed you get, the more crisscross you can see some of these tributaries and how easy it would be to section off places. So that's a pretty good theory, it seems like, for why they seldom unite. Let's make sure we understand the part of the world we're in while we're on the Jamboard here. Here's modern-day Iraq. That's where I told you that Uruk is. Here's your Mediterranean Sea with Egypt right below it. I was showing you right next to it. Here were your rivers flowing down to the Persian Gulf. So this is the area we're studying right here, a little bit more towards the Persian Gulf than towards the Mediterranean side. We'll expand to there, but early on it's right over here instead. They do develop some education and writing. This, of course, unfortunately, are only the wealthy males. The form of writing that they're using is called cuneiform or cuneiform. You'll hear it pronounced either way, and that is a lesson for you in ancient history especially, but also through the Middle Ages. You'll oftentimes have two different pronunciations or maybe even more. It really is kind of depending upon what country of origin you're getting your information from. And I just want you aware that if you would hear maybe a professor pronounce it in a different way than what I'm giving you here, it doesn't mean that either of us are wrong. He is just choosing, or she is just choosing, a different form of that pronunciation. So cuneiform and cuneiform. Now, normally what I do in this class is I will give you both pronunciations or more, and then from that point after, I will just stick with the one that I think you'll probably hear more often being used, at least in the United States and with more American type sources that you'd come across. Now, cuneiform is a written language that's pressed into clay tablets. You can see that right here. You just take a reed and you can press it in and you can make different symbols. The crazy thing about the cuneiform tablets is they do get dried out in the desert or they get fired, and we still have them. If they use paper or papyrus or something like that, we would lose a lot of that. So by doing those clay tablets, we're able to still have that information. Many of these cuneiform tablets are business transactions. How much you paid for this, and what you give them. Hey, I'm giving you 5 goats and I got 6 barrels of oats, or whatever it might be, back and forth. So we know they had a vibrant economy and traded with a lot of people. The government is going to definitely be a religious-based government, as you do see in most of these early ancient civilizations. I have dictatorship up here, but usually even a dictatorship is more of an aristocracy, meaning rule of the few. So few nobles led by a figurehead who's probably a priest/leader. The economy, I just talked about how they did have a vibrant one with trade. And unfortunately, one lesson that you're going to learn in this class is all of the civilizations we studied did somehow peddle in slavery. So that's really, really unfortunate. That it's not until just, really recent in history that we have taken a dislike into owning other humans and have said that that is something that cannot occur anymore, unfortunately. I do want you aware that slavery in the past might look a little bit different than what you imagine from the American slavery perspective. The slavery in ancient history is not at all racial-based or location-based. You could become a slave in your own country, native citizen. You just go into debt or criminal activity of some type. That can happen. But of course, you do have that traditional, oh, you go and beat up a place and then you take slaves as part of, your war loot. But really, most historians will tell you that the majority of slaves come from people getting into debt. And it might not be lifelong servitude either. It might just be, a number of years you're going to have to work to try to work that debt off that you owe. They do have art and literature. The most important literature is the Epic of Gilgamesh, coming out of Sumer. And this is one of our big time important ancient works of literature here. It has many religious references to it, fantastical things, but also life lessons and great storytelling. There are many stories that you might recognize from an American perspective. Even if you're not Christian, I'm going to assume you probably have heard of the Garden of Eden story, or even Noah's flood story. Obviously, if you would be Jewish or Christian, you would recognize these stories right away. But just being in America, you've probably heard these referenced already. There are stories very much like this, well before the development of those religions. Now, what do you think about that? I don't know. I think there's a lot of different perspectives you could have on it. And again, this class never tells you how you should think about something, but instead just gives you some things to think about, options to think about. Does it mean that there is one deity or one set of deities and everybody just thinks of them differently, but the stories are going to be similar as they interact with this same deity or deities? Is it that much of religion are just stories that get passed down to try to teach future generations lessons or explain things that are happening or events? Could be that. Or is it just pure coincidence? Is it shared stories that influence other religions? We will see that later on, where we can directly take where one religion gets incorporated by other religions. They do have a lot of invention and innovation. Usually the first ever civilization would, of course, have this, the written language of cuneiform. This is the first written language, standard written language that we know of. They do invent the wheel. So sorry, Flintstones. The wheel does not come till later on with the Sumerians. They also have a number system of 1 through 60. I want you to think for a moment. We still use this in some ways of measurement. In which way of measurement do we still have a 1 through 60 scale? Hopefully you are right and you all yelled out time. We still do our time number system based upon the very first ever civilization. How crazy is that to think about, that we have not improved upon that since then? I think this is just one of the many times you're going to see in this class that these ancients and middle-aged people, they can do things with they are smart people, they are determined people, and they can accomplish amazing things with what they have. Oftentimes, we discredit them, that there's no way they'd be able to know this or whatnot. That is very untrue when you look back on what these people are able to accomplish. Sailboats, they have those. Law code is going to get developed. And of course, if you're going to have any type of city-state, you're going to need a law code. They have a lunar calendar, and they even take that wheel and they strap it onto the back of a horse and create chariots. So you can see the wheels and the sailboat depicted in a carving here, lunar calendar, and even their chariot here. All right, so we have these different city-states dotted around in this area right in here. One of those city-states is Akkad. Now, we said that we're starting around 3500 BCE. You'll see the date here says 2350 BCE. So you've got 1,000 years, That's a super long time. Just even think about how long America has been around, like actually even been in existence. Only a few hundred years. That's it. This has been 1,000 years of these city-states trading, communicating, warring, and so on. And finally, Akkad. One of these city-states is going to get powerful enough that they will unite the area under one city-state. So this guy that does this is Sargon of Akkad. And if you take a peek here, here is his death mask. Now, his eye isn't supposed to be missing here. He's not Odin or anything like that. It's just damage done to his death mask. But this is the first ever person to unite Sumer. And then he's going to take it even a step further. Instead of just controlling Sumer, he is going to expand. So instead of just these city-states, he's going to go way up around here, and he is going to control people who are not Sumerian. So maybe the people of like Ebla up here, they speak a different language, have different gods. He's going to conquer them and control them. That's the definition that most historians will use for empire, meaning one civilization is going to control other civilizations underneath their flag. So imperialism is a word that we talk a lot about when we study United States history next year. He did that here. Imperialism that ends in empire, then the controlling of other people. This is going to happen around 2350 BCE and gets credit with being the first ever stable empire in civilization. These Akkadians now are Sumerian in their civilization. They are going to be ruling for about 350 years, so a substantial amount of time. This might get a little confusing. In around the year 2000 BCE, we are going to have a foreign people. They're called the Amorites. Historians don't necessarily always agree exactly where the Amorites came from, but these different peoples, that means different language, different law codes, and so on, they are going to start to inhabit the city of Babylon. They're going to attack that city, take it over, they're going to live there. And then from Babylon, they're going to expand out to conquer the rest of the Akkadian Empire. So let's see if I can find a map I'm looking for that has Babylon on it. Here we go. This one has it. So does this one. I think I like this one better. All right, so here we've got Babylon. It's not the Babylonian people, it's the Amorites who come into Babylon, and then from Babylon, they're able to conquer the rest of the Akkadian Empire of Sumerians. So now it's Amorites controlling this area of Mesopotamia and even expanding it a little bit further to what we call the Fertile Crescent, because this is a crescent, and of course it has fertile ground. So now we have a new people who come in. And that is the end of what we would call the Sumerians. The problem that we get when we study this history is, though, it gets a little confusing because, like I said, the Akkadians are going to create the Akkadian Empire, but they're still Sumerian. So this area is still Sumer. When the Amorites come in, they're going to take it over and be a different civilization then, controlling these people. All these people don't just die. They're just ruled by somebody else now. And there'll be assimilation on both ways. Usually the dominant power is going to keep most of their civilization and pick up some characteristics from the people that they have conquered, but it doesn't always have to be that way, especially when it comes to Egypt. I'll talk about that. So these people now, though, instead of calling this the Amorite Empire or Amorite civilization, which is what would be very accurate, we unfortunately call it the Babylonian Empire. And the Babylonian Empire is very, very important, so it's a well-known name in history. But the problem is it really the Babylonians? So you can see it's kind of misworded. It should be the Amorite Empire, and it would really signify that everything has changed. Instead, though, We do call it the Babylonian Empire, and that is what's accepted, and you need to know it's the Babylonian Empire. You just need to know that it's the Amorites functioning out of Babylon that have created the Babylonian Empire. All right, that is the end of my teaching here. You now have a couple videos